Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, friends. Thanks for joining for yet another episode of the Indus podcast. So today we're going to talk about data management in SAP Cloud ALM. So I know that the one of the most important and the most time-consuming and the part of any transformation is preparing your data for the transformation. So the data preparation is probably the hidden effort behind any and all successful transformations. Fragmented, inconsistent, and hard to evaluate data must first be cleaned and transformed so that it can be migrated to the new system. And once that happens, only then can you move from data analysis to intelligent decision support. So in order to cover that and how SAP Cloud ALM can help you do that, we have Grigor with us. Grigor, can I ask you to quickly introduce yourself and take it away, please?
Yes, thanks a lot. So I'm Gregor, I'm the area product owner for data management application in SAP Cloud ALM. I've got a lengthy history in SAP consulting, so about 15 years of consulting in that data management, data migration, and S/4HANA transition space. And as part of this, basically, I'm leading the initiative here to migrate or to prepare the source systems for an optimal migration. Cool. Then I'll continue. So what are we going to look at it today? So just to put this into perspective, we have the overarching SAP Business Transformation Center as an overview here. That's all functionality that we are deploying via Cloud ALM as part of the migration-specific or transition-specific capabilities. But you can see here, we're already covering the major phases of the transition. We are focusing on finding the right approach. We are hoping we are supporting you in scoping and data preparation activities. And afterwards, we have the capabilities to do either the transition as a move to RISE or as the actual transition ECC to S4 from a transformation execution perspective. So there we are covering topics like software upgrade, update manager. We've got the lean selective data transition as part of Business Transformation Center to do selective transitions based on company code or time slicing, plus with the capability to do chart of account conversions on the fly. Then we have, of course, the classical new implementation S/4HANA migration cockpit usage to do the transition into SAP S4. Then last but not least, as we're trying to validate the outcome of the transition, we have a capability called, a product called Data Transition Validation Framework, where we can able to validate that the transition itself was successful. And what you can see here already, that's all embedded into that overarching agent-led toolchain topic. And you see here, there were a couple of sessions which we're already handling. Overarching Business Transformation Center by Karen. Tonya had an overview on the agent-led toolchain. So we got all of these sessions already in place if you're looking forward to finding additional information which is required here. As we're looking today into the specific area, as you can see here, fairly at the beginning of the transition. So you already have potentially chosen your transition approach, and you're now trying to understand what are, from a data perspective, the topics that you need to consider when doing in order to make your transition more safe or more successful. So we have this, of course, we know that there's a lot of transformation happening at the moment. We know we need to go fast. We need to reduce costs. That's what basically you as customers are always going to be forwarded or focusing on trying to adopt this. We are trying to have a quick adoption of new capabilities. We have the opportunity to move as fast as possible into those new technical environments or new products that SAP is releasing. So this is the overarching situation that you're currently or most customers are facing when trying to adopt this new business or autonomous enterprise from an SAP perspective. So how do we support this? From an SAP perspective, with the focus on the data perspective. So migration and modernization is a topic that is basically, as we saw, already relevant for all of the customers. We who do have the data management system with an underlying data management solution, both running on Cloud ALM in order to make your data, I would say, preparation efforts and the cleansing of those or the improvement of your data situation as efficient as possible. So what do we have? What's the current state in most environments? We have quite a complexity in order to say like multiple different LOB solutions are there, which are handling individual issues. If you need to have one view at your entire landscape, you need to go into different solutions, products, or extensions. We're trying to simplify this now with the unified platform on SAP Cloud ALM. You're going to see this later on. In the demo, where we see it's a conglomerate or a collective overview of all of the different possibilities or all of the different functional areas in order to understand, is there a cleanup that is required? Is there something that we would propose from an improvement perspective? So that's now simplified and unified into one platform on Cloud ALM, utilizing the data management solution. Then we know, of course, there is an efficiency topic. I mean, some of these cleanups are quite resource intense, both from a, I would say, overall volume perspective. So you need to spend some time on this. And in most cases, this is really critical resources. So your lead finance person needs to go through this. So that's why it's important that we are enabling now the first AI-driven automations here, so that some of the tasks are getting taken over by I would say, an agent or a solution, which is sort of working as a companion next to you, giving you insights, giving you guidance. You don't need to search for resolutions anymore. There is no need, for example, to go into different ServiceNow tickets, raising them, requesting for some support topics like this. So there we're all helping you up to the point of actually improving the data situation in your source system. Then there is some gaps in there if you think about topics like, is this really still a reactive approach? I mean, from a governance perspective, the idea is that we take, or that the solution takes over your data quality monitoring, proactively notifies you if there's something basically that is you need to take care of, if there's an issue getting or a new issue getting introduced, or specifically in the data area in certain situations. For example, there might be cleanups overwritten because of non-optimal setup of interfaces or things like this. So be aware that not just the data is getting cleaned once, but that it stays clean and that we constantly understand if there's changes to the existing situation. Overall, from a guidance perspective, we give you the full guided end-to-end flow in between like the source system itself, up to the point of that we're trying to guide you through the process of how to do the cleanup and how ready, for example, you are for in your specific source system in one of your environments, in order to understand, is this something where, for example, my test system, is this up to date? Can I run a test migration next week? So is my system prepared good enough? What's my guidance towards like a go live being or that is currently planned for like the next 2 to 3 months? How many of those activities are still outstanding? How much effort are we foreseeing in order to do the cleanup in certain areas and things like that? As I was talking about a solution and the assistant and agents in parallel, I'll try to do a quick differentiation here, what's part of the solution and what's part of the assistant and agents which are running over and on top. We have the core capability as part of Cloud ALM in BTC, where the data management is existing. You can use this already. Once your systems are connected, you can manually run data assessments. You can do a quality run. You can assess your relevancy and retention. We're going to see this later as well for obsolete materials. So we give you all of this information, and even without the support of any agents or assistants, this is a fully functioning solution which you can utilize as of today already. We are live since end of December last year, so that's already on the market, and it gets constantly extended both from a content perspective as well as from a capability perspective. We're going to see the deep dive into content and capability extensions later on. The idea is, what's the purpose? We want you to be able to have a system-wide transparency with regards to data transition readiness. So assuming you want to do a migration from ECC or transition from ECC to S4, covering all different transition scenarios, could be greenfield, brownfield, or anything in between. We want to make you aware of what the current situation is existing, or what the current situation is in your source environments, and to support you with the scope decision, what should be cleaned up, who's going to do the cleanup, and managing the cleanup status. From a value perspective, that's all of the preparation and governance, where we aim at having only the relevant data in the right quality in your source system as a starting point for the transition project, or in the beginning of the transition project, as well as for each and every individual, for example, test migration, so that you are aware, assuming that you're going to go into the transition of a specific system, is this something that we are foreseeing to be successful, or are there major points to be considered to be cleaned up first? That's all part of the solution itself. From user experience, of course, it's dashboard driven. It's real-time access to the source system, so we're connecting to them, and we are covering multiple different function areas like MM, IM, STPP, FI, topics like this, and it's available to all SAP Cloud ALM entitled users. On the user and assistant, basically, then we're going into that topic of intelligent automation. So that's what we are currently still releasing, or we are currently finalizing the development, and then we're going to go into an early adapter mode. We are trying to focus more on decision support, guidance, reasoning to understand what should be done. We're helping you with the automation. So cleanups, for example, are available as a standard part of data management solutions. So you can run automatic resolutions and trigger them manually, but you can take this or hand this over to an assistant or your companion as well, sitting next to you, who's then, for example, doing test runs, provides you with the feedback, gives you like a reasoning or like judges on the responses that you get and things like this, and searches for example, for additional solutions which might be there. So the idea is that we're part of those migration and modernization agents, and they are to be paid via AI credits when they are getting executed. I'll start now with the overview of the core solution. So if you think about this, the core solution is a capability that runs against your source ECC system, and basically gives you a rating of how ready you are to do the transition. So the phases are: you connect your system first. Connection is done via Cloud Connector and an OData endpoint. That's why the source system minimum required release is an EHP7 on source ECC system. And we have the possibility to basically then start analyzing. For that analyzing, we using different technical approaches to do the analysis. We are reusing, of course, existing cleansing or analysis reports coming out of the different LOBs. But we do have the possibility as well over and on top to do like to use semi-dynamic SQL scripts that are running on your source system in order to identify certain data constellations which we are foreseeing or which we know from the past, which are going to create potentially going to create an issue. You're going to get the description. I'll show you that later on in the system demo. And after the analysis is done, basically then it's a question of what do I need to fix? Where do I need to fix this? Is this something you can take over the rating from us? So we give you an insight into, is this a mandatory or a recommended fix? You take over the recommendations, and then you can decide if you want to put this into scope or not. The final or the next step as part of the, I would say, connect to improve space is then that the improvement actually gets executed. So we're supporting there with certain automations in order to, for example, execute certain reports, provide you with the input, make sure that, for example, you can that you are able to validate the outcome. We're going to do before and after image in order to make sure that this is still correct. And then afterwards, as a final step, we're going to support you on the governance. So governing the process means two things. So for me, we just released the capability that for example, a production fix, if you want to do an automatic resolution in a production environment, requires you to pre-validate this in a non-production environment first. So we're going to check this. You're going to basically connect this one, and you have that approval workflow to make sure that you are allowed to do this, at least the 4I principle. And in the future, we're going to connect this even in between systems and the landscapes to do that one. So the overarching governance then is then continued with the continuous monitoring of the environments to make sure like two topics, if new issues are rising or arising again, that might be an issue. We know that systems are constantly changing and that in those environments we might have for example, interfaces which are pushing data into the environments. We might have certain processes which are invalidating data and things like this. And the second topic, what we shouldn't underestimate, is that we are constantly shipping additional content. So two opportunities or two points in the process where a new issue or an existing issue can be reopened is basically when we continue monitoring. There is a support from an agent here to say like run every night or after daily deployment when the new content is deployed, see if something is happening there. And then afterwards you get a notification to say we identified a new issue, we foresee this to be critical. If that's a critical issue, there is a description, and then you're basically linked to the respective analysis run and all of the details so that you can follow up and then afterwards make a decision if this is a critical issue to follow up on it. So we've talked about a lot about this. So what we're now going to do is I'm going to quickly switch into the actual application that we're going to see now. Let me do that. Cool. So what you see here as a starting point is basically an SAP assessment. So that we started against an existing source system in order to derive now, is the system ready for transition or is it not ready for transition? What we see here is now, I'm going to start with this. We have the source system is BTS. We've got a source client, which is 310. And that means that we are currently working against that source system, BTS source client 310. What's important here is this source system, BTS 310, there's only going to be one assessment for this source system. In this case, Marine created this, so it's Marine's assessment one, but there's only going to be one assessment against that source system out of one single client tenant. Why do we do so? The idea is that different end users will be working in the same environment, in the same cloud ALM data assessment, and they are working against the same source system. So if I've just initiated an analysis, I'm trying to share all of this information afterwards with my colleagues. So I don't want, we are trying to implement here a central point of data, single usage, so that everyone contributes, for example, for a trend analysis of the assessments that someone else did. What you see here, for example, we have a former member, someone left the project, he did an analysis of 20 KPIs, Marine did one, Maris did one. So everyone is working in the same environment with different types of scopes and assessments that he's doing, and still basically they're sharing in between the different data, so that we have per KPI, what we're going to see later as well, in a trend analysis in order to understand, is there some changes, how is it changing in between, and is there some improvements to be executed. So what you can see here as well is some of the scope types. As I described earlier, we have some monitoring in place, which is done by an AI assistant, or we do have some manually executed runs. So you can see that on the scope type, was this an AI assisted scope run where the tooling itself decided on the scope, or is this something where the user decided himself of what he wants to execute at that specific point in time? The AI assisted, of course, is always aiming at reducing the impact to the chosen source system on the ABAP side as much as possible. So one example, if you already executed like as a run yesterday or a few days before, we're going to assess like, is there already a trend existing? If the trend is, for example, saying like, we assessed this issue like already 5 times, there was never an issue, then we lower the frequency on this one so that you're not constantly running the same analysis over and over again in just to basically derive on a daily basis that there are no issues. So reduce impact to the source system as much as possible. And you see here, for example, there was a certain point in time we started with this in June. Now we continue here in August. So it's basically something which is constantly running, or up to the point running. We deactivated the agent here, and then we can reassess this. So then you see afterwards the impact of how the system changed. From an overarching perspective, we always see if we are in an environment which is productive or non-productive, just to be aware in which constellation we are currently dealing. You see some overviews on the connectivity and the status of the overarching assessment. When we go now into the quality space, I mentioned we have data quality and relevancy and retention. The data quality is basically currently divided into let's say, more or less an analysis space and then a correction space. In total, we're currently shipping 115 KPIs. In this system, 78 of the 115 are looking okay. So we've got basically only a few, I think 37, which are currently in issue. And we see the major ones which are currently looking fine is finance. So in CVI, unfortunately, there's no high volume or no high quality ones. We're going to go into the details afterwards. But actually, finance, the majority of the ones are reporting back with a good one. KPIs pending quality check. At the moment, there's 0 KPIs pending a quality check. So the advantage here is, remember, we were just shipping, I think yesterday we shipped another 30 finance KPIs. They would be put coming up here automatically in your active assessments. And then either by you would manually trigger those ones, or the assistant would pick them up and at least start to get a trend for those ones. So to make sure that we know if there's an issue and that we can proactively notify you. What you see down here again is another quick deep dive into where we have the autocorrectable ones. At the moment, we're focusing on autocorrections in finance, which we're constantly enhancing. And you see afterwards how many of those issues can be automatically corrected. If we want to deep dive into this now, because now basically I've just got a rough understanding of what the current situation is, I go into the data quality. And now I get an overview. So what you have is by functional area, production planning, MMIM, finance, and CVI, we get a dropdown and we get certain insights here. So what you see here, for example, as a starting point, there is a few issues in the CVI space. So for example, there is an incorrect industry value in the vendor master, which is currently maintained. We've got total number of issues. It's three instances which are there. I'll go into those ones. And wherever we are, we always have a description of the issue. So what you can see here is what does that indicate? What's the impact? What's a possible root cause? And then we've got, as mentioned, the trend analysis. So what we see here already, this is a static one. So no one has worked on this. I think it's quite obvious because our correction status that we're maintaining is new. So no one, even in the tooling, has indicated that they're working on this one. So that's why it's basically getting executed. We see when it was executed by whom. And we see basically the trend analysis, how this is shaping over time. What we have over and on top are some correction insights. So there's always, in this case, it's a manual one. We've got manual and automated ones from a correction perspective. And then you can see how would you basically derive this. So what's the proposed resolution? First of all, determine the right industry correct. Then you go into the following transaction, and then you configure this business mapping. I'm not the business partner expert, but this is basically for each and every KPI, all of these 115 ones, there's always a high-level description of the issue or of the data constellation in that part, and there's always a description of how to solve this with a reference to a more detailed link in order to understand if that's an issue or not. And that pattern you're going to constantly see. So each and every one is built up like this. If you want to now see all of the details, there's a table which we're storing on the source system, all of the detailed entities, information of which ones are there. So the three basically errors that you would see are now stored in that table. So if you want to have the exact entities, go into the source system and basically check there. What we're currently working on is an overview on top with a subsection here to give at least 5 to 10 examples that you can pull off. I mean, if it's like in this case, it's an internal test system and we manually created some inconsistencies. So as long as we're staying in a limit of like 3, that's fine. But we do know, for example, in finance, there might be a few 100,000. That's why we don't want to create another list here with 100,000 entities. We rather let you work on the source system directly and storing this in a table. That's the overview of what we do have on the quality side. If you now switch over to that relevancy and retention, you see here we are planning to deploy additional capabilities throughout the year now. Just since yesterday, we deployed the first capability. The first capability is obsolete materials. So we did the assessment to check, are there obsolete materials? Remember, we have the slogan, or the idea of the product is only the relevant data in the right quality. So we want to now get the combination. So if we have that obsolete materials now in place, we give you an obsolescence analysis to say when was it used and when wasn't it used. So what you see here is in total, we understand that there are 412 materials which have never been used. And they were created either beyond 24 months or just recently. So what you now see, you can now do basically the deep diving into those ones. And you see, for example, distributed into different settings. So for example, the reason might be that they are blocked, or there's a deletion flag set, or both flags are set, or there is something that you still need to do as a cleanup. We have some analysis around what type of a material those are. And now basically the idea is what you can do. You can deep dive into different aspects here, like is it used coming out of certain company codes? Is it coming out of certain material types or obsolete materials? And we would give you the guidance now, if you go into this, like which ones are there to be existing. You can deep dive now into the obsolescence details. It's a raw material out of the material group or something like this. What's the count? And we can do the deep dive into all of these materials, which we would see as an opportunity for either setting a block flag or a deletion flag or setting both flags in order to improve basically the usage or basically the existence of materials. This combined, if you think about this, if you would now have an MMIM or whatever, a cleanup which is related to this one, I would rather suggest that you basically clean up your usage first and then afterwards do the assessment again. Because certain, for example, data quality issues might be disappearing because of the obsolescence cleanup which are happening there. So let's assume, for example, we now later on move into a business partner issue. If the business partner has never been used and was created like 10 years ago, then most likely we should rather set a deletion flag instead of like now cleaning up, for example, the industry sector for this one or industry segment, because then we're cleaning up data which is not actively in use. So, and that's what is one of the examples why we're trying to combine the two different topics. So one of the topics that we're combining here is the usage of the data plus the quality, and overarching that view basically is then going to give you the right sequencing of activities. So rather, for example, do the cleanups first and then only do the on the usage side and then do the cleanup on the quality side. In finance, for example, we're going to do this slightly different. For example, if the recommendation is to do certain archiving checks, that's something that we are planning to do in the data volume management optimization. Here in that DB usage and optimization side, if we give you the recommendation there to archive or do another archiving run, because archiving, what we can see is already active in your environment, but we would see another area for scope, then you rather need to do the data quality cleanup before, so that the archiving run is more successful compared to those ones. Then I want to give you quickly some insights into what AI-assisted runs are. So remember, we now, for us, a data quality run is basically one execution of a check or multiple checks on the source system. What you can see here, for example, is now, including the reasoning, basically a run which was executed where someone chose to use an AI-assisted scope. So the tooling now decided themselves, and they picked the following KPIs to be executed. You see a reason why it was executed. So for example, in this case here, we know it's stable with errors, so we know the trend is there, it's there continuously there. But the last one was 6 days ago. So as this is from a criticality perspective, only a recommended KPI, so this is not necessarily blocking your transition. This is something that we, after 6 days, we would recommend at least once a week. Check again if the form of address for employee vendors is still an issue. We found out there are still 5 of those ones existing. What you see as a different area is, for example, here we have a mandatory check. There we know as well there are issues. There were issues in the past, and the reason why the agent put it into scope is basically that the last one is 3 days ago. It's a more critical issue than, for example, the 26A here. So that's why we've put it already into scope prior to putting it in to reassessing basically the CVI scope for those ones. And you're going to see later on each and every activity that the agent does, he gives you a reason why he did this, and basically gives you afterwards a summary of the outcome. And that's what he's going to use in the background, for example, in the async execution that he does once a day. So he takes this, he's got certain reasons behind why he would be putting something into scope. Potentially even a topic of like, we're now getting closer to a go live, so I'd rather do more checks in order to be safe, those type of things. So most higher frequency of critical issues, the closer we are to a production landscape or to a production migration, intended production migration. That's about how the core application works, plus how basically the agents are interacting here. One thing that I wanted to show you, there is one topic that the customer is getting when utilizing our agents. So what we see here is, for example, that we do have a correction priority currently in place. So the correction priority here at the moment is, for example, in order to derive quick wins. So what the agent did is based on business criticality and easiest to fix. So he takes over some effort in here. So he basically estimates how long this is going to take. He's going to give you a reasoning behind, and he's going to basically then start basically adopting based on dependencies and things like this, what you should be doing. What you always see, I think the importance here is as well, certain things in finance, for example, are in high quality, so we know that there's nothing to be done. And then sequencing gets into perspective, and we really give you basically only the ones to be cleaned up in the right sequence, in the right format. So the idea is, our business person can afterwards pick and choose, start sorting via the correction priority, and understand, okay, well, from a tooling perspective, we would propose you to start with the missing account holder information. It's a rather quick fix. It's only 2 affected. So this is something that you could put into mind. Over and on top, we are now extending this into like identifying quick wins and long-running jobs as well, so that we make you aware of that a certain task is to be executed with quite a lengthy exercise to be done. So let me switch back to the presentation. So where we stayed now is here. So what we introduced is the assessment. We introduced the transition. We introduced the quality and the different metrics for relevancy and retention. And we introduced the possibility, basically, I shared that you can execute certain auto corrections out of the system where you can use those ones and things like this. So you saw the differentiation on the KPI level. What do we currently ship? Just a matter of fact, status from yesterday. You saw those ones. We have the 115 KPIs available for data quality and one for the relevancy and retention with the obsolete materials. I just gave you examples. You saw a few more. Each and every tenant gets automatically upgraded, so there's nothing that you need to do from a content perspective. As soon as we ship new content, you're going to directly get this. We have the 15 auto corrections that we can directly trigger from the tooling, similar run. So we have this one run concept to say, like, it's quality run, retention run, or correction run that you can generate there, and then it connects against your source system and executes the run if you give the authorization and automate this one. What are some of the conditions and restrictions that we would foresee here? So our current starting point is an S/4HANA transition from Cloud ERP to S/4HANA. private and public cloud, will be working for on-prem scenarios as well. We are trying to extend this in the future, or the future is to extend this into other transition scenarios as well. Potentially, it could be something like an ECC to, for example, success factors for HR data, things like this. We require SAP Cloud as the execution platform, and of course, the connectivity to this. So you need to set up the connectivity between Cloud ALM and your source environment, so that we have basically the prerequisites met. So you need to do the solution manager add-on needs to be quite recent. Plus a TCI needs to be implemented there on the source so that we can actually run the activation. We only replicate aggregated data into Cloud ALM. So that's one of the core principles that we're keeping. So you're not going to find any GDPR, DPP relevant information at the moment in Cloud ALM. So there's no GDP or issues with this topic. So we're only replicating like number of issues and things like this at the moment. So there's no issue that is going to get erased there. From a content perspective, as you saw, we're currently focusing on finance, CBI, material master, and production planning. And of course, we're continuously expanding this. So as I said, like just this week or yesterday, we extended it by another 30 KPIs for finance. We're constantly picking up its individual teams working on this and contributing. How would you start this? If you would like to use this, you basically subscribe to your SAP Cloud ALM so that you've got your Cloud ALM tenant. Then basically check for the installation. So you need to make sure that the installation is set up properly. Then you do the authorizations and roles according to the guides that we give you. You connect your system, and then you start creating your first assessment. As soon as you have your assessment created, you can run as many runs as possible. And you can actually see basically how your system is shaped against this one. We've got the quick start guide here, which I'm referencing here. We're going to share the slides afterwards. The quick start guide is basically going to guide you, and it's going to support you in setting up all of these installations. What's the current state and what's the outlook? We started in Q4 with a fairly minimal scope, or with a smaller scope, MVP scope of 18 KPIs. We then extended to 85 in Q2, plus we identified, based on ServiceNow agentic analysis, for example, now roughly 1,400 additional KPIs, potential ones. We introduced on the remediation side the correction runs already last quarter. And in this quarter, we're extending at least to 120 KPIs. You saw with 115, we're almost there already. But we are constantly extending this. There's a full team working on this one. We introduced the obsolete materials as an additional application. DB usage and duplicate materials are still aimed to be delivered in Q3. We have already delivered the approval workflow so that you can have a 4I principle in order to restrict the changes to an existing environment. We can cover this in any case already by roles. So we do have specific roles that we are shipping where you can enable either that an end user is allowed to trigger a correction or not. And on the AI side, we basically are now moving into the EAC process for a few of those agents, which you're going to see later on from an overarching perspective. In Q4, basically, we're going to cover additional KPIs, additional domains. Don't judge if it's going to be 146. There might be even more. We have that archiving setup check to be delivered via relevancy and retention. And then we've got in the remediation space, the automatic validation of a resolution and the actual execution of a resolution. And we're going to introduce something which we call the content agent. That's what we're aiming at, where you can define in natural language your own specific KPIs that you either want to be executed as a once-off execution, or that can be constantly then monitored as any other content that we are delivering. For next year and follow on, of course, we're going to try and see if we're moving into topics like migration, validation, sovereign cloud support, other solution extensions like transition to success factors, and we're going to aim at integration with Signavio and DynaX, so both reading and writing some of the constant. So much about the application itself. Now we're going to do in a quick lab preview of the moving into the assistants and agents. What we shared quite prominently at Sapphire, that there's an extension now of the agent-led toolchain. So we had the integrated toolchain in the past, and now we are evolving basically into the agent-led toolchain with the support of AI that is built along the entire process. So we have the business transformation level that you see here that enables the end-to-end orchestration of value-based business transformation and continuous improvement. And then we have the business transformation that addresses the value and change management journey and the embedding of the modernization agents, which are focusing on all of the, or directly into the transition journey itself. So you got to see, for example, that topics are in there like preparation, guidance on data perspective. We're going to give you a quick overview of I'll share quickly the 7 other seven assistants which are intended to be there. Overarching, that's all supported by Cloud ALM, and we're jointly working with, I think the most prominent ones are Signavio, Lina, Extrude for consultants, and of course our partners like Synity, Tricentis, and OpenText. What is the agent-led toolchain, or which migration modernization assistants are we currently introducing there? We've got a system analysis assistant that is basically taking care of all of the necessary analysis data that is outside the other core domains like data management or custom code, consolidating all of this information into a central space. So to understand as much as possible where are we leaning towards, combining all of the potential sources of information. We've got data management that we already talked about. We're going to deep dive into this a bit further later on. We have the custom code, which is helping you with remediation back to standard and topics like this. Then we've got the configuration assistant, which is helping you in your public cloud transition to move basically your existing ECC customizing into the CBC setup with back to standard and standardization. We've got the test management assistant. One of the crucial aspects of a transition is going to be the validation of the transition itself. So they are going to support you with automatic created test cases, test plans, and the execution of those ones for regression testing and topics like that. Rollout system is something in the near future where we are thinking about supporting topics like company-wide, country-specific rollout activities, learning from others and things like this. And then we have the project management assistant, which is considering 2 things. Like, first of all, the guidance on how to set up a project. So what are the necessary scope topics? Could be like, for example, what's the optimal transition scope? What's the optimal transition scenario? Consolidating a few of the information which is coming, for example, out of custom code, data management assistant, and system analysis assistant, but as well focusing on topics like classical, I would call it, project management scope activities, similar to like, can I get, please generate a weekly status report, what are my major risks and things like that. You saw already the connect, analyze, decide, improve, govern. What we're now going to see is basically the different assistants or agents which are basically supporting the different phases. So remember we said the agents are supporting or utilizing the platform optimally, putting some guidance and reasoning on top. And each and every activity that an agent executes always leaves tracks and traces in the environment. So you know exactly basically what the agent produced, and you can always access the output of the agent within the application to make sure that, for example, what we shared earlier, that the reason why a certain KPI was put into scope for the analysis that was running, that was executed as a monitoring this morning, that if this was exactly done because of a specific purpose. We have a few other transition-related agents, and I'm quickly going to go into those ones in the next space. Idea is that we separate them into different phases. So the initial one is a decision on what needs to be analyzed, what is the current situation, specifically shaping this down to an optimization of volume of the analysis and impact. Then we have the evaluation of the current results of that run. So the idea is that the customer gets then afterwards, if necessary, a notification or heads up. This is like the summary of the run. This is what was generated. we do see a business impact here. There's something changing. We found a new inconsistency in this area. Maybe we need to rerun a certain analysis topic like this. Then we do the prioritization based on the newest result. Remember, as we're doing subsets, the prioritization needs to take into consideration topics like who's currently fixing what, is something in progress already, are newly identified issues basically worth putting it into a higher priority than the ones which are currently already been identified like 2 weeks ago, and to do that reprioritization or resettlement. And then we've got the last one, which is basically the validation topic in that chain before we're starting to move anything. So that is basically validating if the fixes that we can be executed automatically will be successful. So he's doing test runs, he's creating subsets, he's parallelizing data, he's running it against the sandbox in order to understand if basically the necessary or the proposed automatic resolution will be successful as a preemption. And the last one, this transition data quality automated resolution agent, is then the one which is afterwards doing actual corrections in the system production or non-production. So there you're really going to see basically enhancements or modifications of data. That's basically for me the point where you can activate or deactivate, deciding up to that point. That's why I call it scope to validation. We're touching your systems, but we're not modifying any data. Up to that point, it's only read and analysis activities. Last but not least, of course, the relevancy and retention is going to be another agent who's then putting into scope, assessing, do I need to reassess this, similar to the scope agent that we have for data quality. If we think about this now, and you might have heard of Joule Works with the introduction of Joule as a new full screen Joule entity, we have prepared like a bit of a demo, how we're envisioning in the near future, how an interaction with basically the application on Joule will be working. So what you're going to see now, I'm going to switch back to another recorded demo, where Elena, our data management lead, is starting. And you're going to see basically, or you're going to find some phrases again. You're going to see afterwards basically the engagement on Joule, which is running then on top of the agent and assistants on top, which are running on top of the application to do that interaction in between. So what you're going to see, Elena is going to do the initial assessment. And she's going to identify some finance issue, and then she's going to hand them over to Aaron, who's then going to do the deep dives in the finance area. So let me switch back to the application. So we're going to have that deep dive here now. So that's your landing page that you're going to start basically coming from Joule. So you've got your good morning page. This is Elena. I'm Elena. I've got some information on where we stand at the project. At the moment, I get a while you were away. I'm not so sure yet about my correction status. If I need to do something, I get some important tasks in here that the tool is guiding me to do. And of course, I do have some risks like unknown status of quality, don't know how much manual correction effort I need to plan for my project. And optimal system size with all of the optimizations is not yet clear either. So what do I start now with? I'm going to go into the analysis of my production system in order to start understanding if now my leading production system, what do I need to ultimately solve for my production system? So what you see here now, the system is now creating an assessment and afterwards executing a run. So what we saw now, in this case, we analyzed 100 systems, again, the PRD1 system. We have the KPI assessment, which was done. We have the 83 autocorrections already available. We have 37 KPIs, which are requiring my attention, and 63 are looking fine. So I'm now going to open a separate space to basically work for my production system for the data preparation. What you're going to see here now, again, the summary, we do have an overview on the autocorrections. So in total, we have 21 autocorrections for which are relevant from myself for the product. So that's basically out of the 37 KPIs, 28 of them are basically do have an autocorrection, 21 of them are for mandatory KPIs, and 7 for them are for recommended KPIs. What we're always focusing on here is the idea to have like quick fixes. Autocorrection should be quick fixes for myself. So why wouldn't I basically worry about, or why wouldn't I want to correct certain or implement certain SAP recommendations, even if it's not breaking the process, but to improve basically my overarching system. What we see now here is basically another view on what we saw already in the application itself. We see how many KPIs we are delivering per functional area and how many of those ones are in high quality. So major gap is here on finance. What we see as well, there's an introduction on basis. Why do we have basis? Because it's an overarching view on not just data quality, but data quality and relevancy and retention. So there is certain tasks, like 3 optimization potentials, where we can technically improve certain volumes. What we see here as well on the screen is some next actions, of course, and a small sizing estimation. That goes back to what we had with that usage estimation, which we're planning to ship in this quarter still, that we understand where are some savings potential, like 60 gig savings on finance, maybe because we do an archiving recommendation. Some technical cleanups can be done in order to reduce basis usage, and then the logistics. So what we're going to do next, we're basically going to define our scope. We have now the overview. Now we're switching from KPIs into instances. That's what we saw on the other screen as well. So we have got a 740,000 issues here in finance that we want to focus on. So I'll activate this one, go confirm the scope, and then continue the review with the finance auto corrections. I'm now going to see basically the breakdown. We've got in total 740,000 issues in finance. After auto correction, we're envisioning that 1,500 issues are going to be remaining. Those are manual cleanups that I need to do. And again, we're breaking the KPIs down into what is a quick fix, what's not a quick fix. So we've got mandatory corrections with an auto correction. So those ones would be very quick fixes that we would afterwards do. We have 16 of them that we can afterwards continue with. So overarching, again, like we are giving now the guidance of how to interact with this. I want to proceed now with my finance scope. That means that the finance scope itself will basically require a simulation. I just want to make sure, we've got a proposal now to understand this. So the idea is, can we do this? And basically do a first simulation, goes back to the validation agent, which is now going to be executed in the background to say, like, we know there's a technical automation. Is it going to be successful? Are there certain other prerequisites to be met? Is there additional data that we need to acquire and things like this? But as now Elena is handing over, because she's not the finance expert, she's going to create that space now and invite Aaron, and asked basically the application to choose the best non-production system for simulation. Remember, we were here in a production environment, and in that production environment, we need to make sure that we understand where we can find relevant data for the remediation activities. So we now ask Aaron to basically choose this one. We found the sandbox. It's a very recent copy, so it almost reflects production. So we use this, and then Aaron basically takes over. And now you see again the KPI IDs that we saw on the other screens. We see a potential success rate. We are seeing basically an overarching status on the correction per KPI. So we have that audit flow to say, we did a simulation, we now fix it in non-production. We do a review afterwards, so you need to confirm that the fix was basically successfully executed. Then we deploy this to production, and then we start monitoring. So it gives you a guidance and an approval workflow to understand which production correction was executed where, how long did it take, for example, additional information and things like this. And that's basically now the combination out of what we saw earlier. Now we're going to run across multiple assessments. We're going to have multiple runs getting coordinated. And in the background, if you want to see this in the actual application, you're going to see each and every, for example, simulation is one run that got executed. Every correction is another one, which you can see afterwards in your managed execution, so that you are always sure like that the agents are not doing something completely on their own, or if they're doing something semi-automated or in an autonomous fashion, that we always know what they executed and that we can trigger this one. What I'm going to switch back now is to the application, to our slide deck, just to do the summary of what we saw. So what we saw here basically is the all-in-one place, like central overarching view on what do we have there from a quality perspective, from a consolidation perspective, from a the for example, retention activities. We got a prioritization on this one. We told you where to look at. We even automated some of the corrections for you. We gave you the guidance in your landscape where to do something. I think this is exactly now all of the additional what we think about this when we saw in the beginning. Governance, automation, support, simplicity. That's what we're now trying to combine into those screens. And that we're having those spaces in place, which will then afterwards guide you through the entire process and making sure that the customer knows exactly, or each and every customer and every person identified knows where to start, which activities are crucial to be taken without manually running all of the different analysis tools, assessing manually the outcomes and trying to prioritize them. So what we have in the final one is the trying to, we will basically enable a faster and more predictable transformation by providing you like less data as a starting point and higher quality data, so that some of the issues which are going to be you're going to be facing as part of the transition are basically cleaned up earlier, and that you have the possibility to have always the clear guidance and visibility into what is the current situation in your environment. How many of those cleanups are already in process? How long are we envisioning those ones? What's the governance in between? So all of these ones are now centrally managed, and you can really get a readiness from a data preparation perspective in a single view on your involved systems. Overarching, we are aiming at reducing at least 25% of your reduction data preparation efforts by now automating the execution, giving you the guidance. You don't need to track and trace what's there. You don't need to find for the right resolutions. And overarchingly, of course, there will be the execution of your transition should be less risky and lower effort, because of a better starting point that we can lean towards. And then again, we are aiming at having only the relevant data in the right quality as your starting point, which from our perspective is going to be one of the key levers in order to improve the overarching execution of your transition project. And with this, I'm coming to the end.
Thank you so much, Igor, for sharing all of this. A quick question. So the agents that you showed us, by when do you think they will be available for customers to start using?
They're going to be available towards the end of Q4. So we're going to have now 3 months of EIC, which we're running, where we're doing some first customer validations, and then we're going to release them in Q4.
And if I understood correctly, these agents will be paid, right? So which means that they will have to be licensed separately.
Consumption. No, they're going to be consumption based. So basically, as long as you are basically, if you've got those
AI units.
exactly AI units, then you can consume them via the AI units that you have.
So does that also mean that they need to have a BTP contract with us with AI units and with
exactly.
included?
So you need to have the AI units as from a contract perspective via RISE.
Okay, and I also wanted to check if there is a place where people can go and start exploring this. Is that going to be through the Cloud ALM login that they have, or through SAP for me?
Exactly. No, through, I mean, the agents are, as soon as they are available, they're going to be available in SAP for me to be activated. The core application you directly can see in your Cloud ALM environment. So depending on if you're looking for the solution itself or the agents on top, I mean, solution is already available as of today in all cloud tenants, so you can directly see that. But the agents are going to be activated in SAP for me, or will need to be activated in SAP for me.
Maybe one last question. So of all the customers who have used the solution, where do you see them struggling the most, and what can they do so they avoid that struggle?
Do you mean in the usage of the solution, or in the struggling in their project?
Solution.
Okay. I mean, there is a, I mean, what we see at the moment, we do have a fairly good installation guide. I think the installation itself is pretty straightforward, but we
Straightforward,
do
yeah.
see some struggling in that initial setup. Once the setup is done, I think once you've done the first initial execution, then it's done and dusted. Then you can just basically continue constantly monitoring this. But we
Basically
saw a few
ensuring that
ones.
the right connection to the right systems are there.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, this is like something which you need to consider. And for example, that now that like the right TCI is installed, or like the cloud connector is properly set up. Remember, we're using cloud connector and OData. Not every customer will have already the connection via cloud connector. So there are a few prerequisites that you need to meet. And afterwards, you are pretty much straightforward.
Oh, cool. So tell me something else as well, which is, once let's say a customer has migrated to their cloud version, whether it is
Mhm.
on-premise or whether it is private or public. So does this tool, is it still
The
valid
intention?
after that?
Yes. Yes, I mean, Kandi, I mean, technically, that's why we put this into like I would say, an independent platform, like with Cloud ALM. The idea is we're positioning this as a starting point for your transition, and then afterwards, it's there to stay. So we are starting, or we are planning to start, planning to ship next year some S4 content then as well, so that you can continue basically validating and making sure that certain data constellations, which we are, for example, identifying via ServiceNow tickets, so that those ones are getting validated here as well. We're currently working on an initiative to do constant analysis of ServiceNow tickets, so that we can pre-warn you if, for example, a new inconsistency gets raised that by one of the customers, that we are pre-warning you that that constellation is existing in your environment as well, which might cause an issue in the near future.
Oh, cool. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us, Gregor. And thank you everyone for tuning in. I'll see you next time for the next episode. Until then, this is Mukesh Gupta signing off. Take care.
Thank you.